My name is Gracie Flores, and I am the granddaughter to William Kulokauka Pakani. A lot of people know my grandfather as Uncle Bill. And growing up, we would refer to Grandpa's home as Grandpa's or Grandpa's place. As we got older, we would refer Grandpa's place to the bay or down the bay because my grandfather lived right there on Waiokava Bay. And I remember growing up, my dad, Russell Pakani, and my uncle Chunky, who is actually my dad's older brother, he would take us, me and my siblings, I'm the youngest of 3 kids and all my cousins, and they would take us down to Grandpa's every Sunday. And I remember as a child, sometimes my uncle would come and pick us up. So he would let us know, okay, we're going Grandpa's, and make sure you get all your clothes ready, make sure you get your towel, and he would tell us we're going early because Uncle wanted to go HOLOHOLO. So, as kids, I remember us, preparing ourselves. We have to make sure we get all our stuff ready and that we're up early so that when Uncle comes, we're ready to go. And you don't want to be that person or that guy that missed the bus down to Grandpa's because you're going to stay home all day bored. So, as children, I remember getting ready, and I remember we used to jump in the back of my dad's truck or in the back of my uncle's flatbed, and all of us Kiki would jump in the back and we would head down to Kyokaha. And I remember right when we hit the road to going into Grandpa's, it was like this, feeling of excitement. And I remember, just driving into Grandpa's place was just like an adventure in itself, right? Just, all of us in the back of the truck and going off-roading. So I remember one of my earliest memories of Grandpa's, I was about 4 or 5 years old. So I was born in 1980. So that was back in, the early 80s. And I remember my dad used to take us swimming in Grandpa's pond. And I remember one day, my dad just threw me in the pond. And I guess back then, that's how you learn how to swim, is when you just get thrown in. And so, sure enough, that happened to me. My dad threw me in, and next thing you know, boom, I was swimming. And so, I remember me and my siblings, we learned how to swim in Grandpa's pond. I remember once I learned how to swim, I didn't want to get out. We spent hours swimming in Grandpa's pond. And I remember we would practice our powder, and I remember we would have powder contests with my cousins, and I remember we used to take the empty soda can, or sometimes it was an empty beer can, and we would take the can and we would powder, and if the can flew outside of the pond, then supposedly you was the winner for doing that. And that's something we enjoyed. We used to challenge with my cousins, and we spent hours in the pond. And something about that pond, it's very, very cold. And so if you spend a lot of time in the pond, you'll start to shiver, right? And I remember when I used to get cold, I used to run to the front by the beach, by where the sand was, and I used to lay in the sand, and the sand would warm my body. And I just remember, that feeling of being warmed, and then it would get hot again, and then you would run back to the pond and jump in the pond again, and then run back and just do that all day. I also remember my grandfather had this big kamani tree in the front by the beach and on the sand, and he would make these swings out of tires, like old tires, and we would swing on the swing. And I remember fighting with my cousins about who would swing next, and we used to swing on that swing, and it's just pure joy, right, when you're a child. And I remember that was one of my favorite things to do, was swing on that swings. So as I got older, You know, and my siblings got older, my cousins, we all have our own families now. We have our own kiki. And, you know, we continue to take our kids down. And so a lot of our older kiki, they know grandpa's place, and they know who their grandfather was. I even, you know, got married there in 2009 to my husband. And so it's a very, very significant place for our ohana. Lots of very, very wonderful childhood memories. Back then, I didn't realize that my grandfather didn't have electricity or running water. You know, I grew up in a traditional home, and my grandfather's home looked like mine. It was beautiful. He had a 2-bedroom home it had a kitchen and a bathroom. It had a huge living area, and it had these huge picture windows in the front that would overlook the bay. And I didn't realize that, you know, the work that he had to put in to even exist there and for us to even enjoy the place. You know, he was definitely a visionary person. He was very innovative because he was also illiterate. He didn't read or write. And so, but he still managed to, you know, take this raw piece of aina and, you know, develop it into something so beautiful. And he was also a very knowledgeable and skilled farmer. And he would have, you know, lots of fruit trees and vegetables. And so he would have all his plants, and, you know, he was just flourishing and thriving on his aina. And so because of that, because of those experiences, you know, it's stuff, you know, things that he instilled in us. You know, still to this day, I, you know, live in that way as well. You know, I live on homestead land in Pane'eva, and I live off grid, and so does my siblings. And, you know, we wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for the experiences that we've learned through our grandfather growing up. And so I'm so thankful for him instilling that in us, because, you know, we want to try to be more self-sufficient, you know, and practice that, and you know, live off our aina. And especially in these times, you know, it's just better to live in that way and be more sufficient and self-sufficient. A lot of the fond memories I have of Grandpa was also when we used to do our family camping trips. I remember even as a child, we camped at Pakani SD. And I remember, you know, anytime there was a school break, Christmas break, spring break, Labor Day, if there was a weekend attached to, or actually a holiday attached to a weekend, most times we camping. And I remember, you know, being so excited. We would ask my dad, you know, Dad, we're going camping, you know, spring break or whatever it is. And we would be so excited, and we would plan to go down to camp on Grandpa's. And we would also, you know, go HOLOHOLO a lot when we camped. You know, we watched Grandpa and my dad and my uncles. You know, they would throw net. You know, they would catch, you know, manini, HOLOHOLO, wo, and you know, I remember us setting net too. We would set the net, you know, in the evening, and then they would pick it up in the morning. And I remember us being so excited when they would pick up the net, and then we were, you know, would wonder what would be in the net today. And I remember we would help get the fish out, or, you know, sometimes there was lobsters in there, and sometimes there was slipper lobsters, and, you know, 7-Eleven crabs and uhus. And I remember my uncle and my dad were like, watch out, you know, they're gonna cut your finger off, you know, the 7-Eleven crabs. So we would be like all intrigued about what was in the net. My dad and my uncle diving for vana. And I remember they would put it in the basket, and they would clean it, and then we would help crack it open and get the meat out. And I remember that was one of Grandpa's favorite things to eat, was vana. I remember also that there was this point, or this, we used to call it Nenoi Point. And if you walk across the bay, there's this hill that comes into a hill, and it's almost like a lookout. And I remember my grandfather, my uncle, my dad, they would go up on top that lookout, and they would look out into the bay, and they would see all the schools of fish, and they would study the ocean and study the current there, and that's where they spent some time, you know, observing the ocean. And if you walk further down, there's a point, and that's where we would cast, where you can cast your pole. And I remember my uncle would make mackerel out of, I guess, flour. He would make this mixture, and it's like bait. So you use that to catch an enue on that point. But sometimes we didn't have bait, so we would use a limu off the rock, because that's what the nenue ate. And also I remember we used to use like pipipi shell, and the snail inside the pipipi shell, we would, you know, use that to catch, you know, hinalea or popa'a, and we would cut that up and hopefully use that for bait and hopefully catch something bigger. And I remember my Uncle Chunky, he made like this bomb nenue poke. And I remember he used to put limukohu inside, and he would put opihi, and he would put inamona if he had it, and I remember he would put onion. And you know, till to this day, like if I eat any of those foods, those flavors, I get so emotional, because it takes me back to, you know, my memories of being there at my grandpa's home. One of our goals as a ohana is to hopefully reclaim our place there, and right now there's some conflict between ohana and, you know, who has the right to be there and who doesn't. And so that's why I think it's so important for us to be a part of MAHA and a part of the association, because my grandfather was one of the founding members of MAHA. So I think it's only right that we support, you know, the families that's been there for generations, and, you know, support their fight to keep their aina in their families forever. My grandfather loved a lot of people, and a lot of people loved my grandfather, and you know, at one time he wanted to, you know, use that place as an educational place for keiki, and to learn about the ocean and about the aina. And you know, hopefully in the future that's something that we can bring to life, and in honor of his memory. You know, my grandfather, he always would tell me and tell us, you know, that he would say, "It's yours, you know, the place, it's yours, go get them." He would always say that. And he also said to us, "No lose them." And, you know, I just hope that that doesn't happen. It's been about 5 years, actually March 2nd, makes 5 years that my grandfather passed away. So, you know, I just hope that he's proud of me and my ohana, and, you know, proud that we're still trying to fight for that place. And so